Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Speakers for Schools broadcast. Thank you for tuning in and joining us today. Today's session will last for roughly around about 45 minutes and will include an interview with our speaker before we later move on to a student Q&A. Questions for our speaker can be submitted via the Q&A function, which you'll find just underneath the stream on your screens. And depending on what device you're using, you might have to scroll down a little bit to be able to see that Q&A box. The Q&A box is open now and it will remain open through the rest of today's session. So we do encourage you to submit as many questions as you like in response to anything that's said today, as we love to hear from you. Keep an eye out a little bit later on as a feedback poll will go live towards the end of the session and all our feedback will be shared with today's speaker. And again, we love to get that feedback on how you found today's session. Now, if you find yourself to experience any sort of issue, please do let us know via that Q&A box and one of our moderators will be on hand to help where we can. Now, that is all our housekeeping done and dusted, and we shall move on to the main event today. So, we're really excited to welcome today's speaker. They are a leader in the world of sort of design and have made some really, really interesting projects. So, we're really excited to dive into his brain today. So, everybody, please welcome Martino Gamper to come and talk to us today. Hello and welcome.
Hello, welcome. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. We're really excited to have you here. I know it's a really sort of unique opportunity to hear from someone that these schools probably haven't spoken to before. So thank you.
Great, thank you as well.
All right, we'll dive into our first question, which is just so we can get to know who you are a little bit better. Can you tell us about your career journey and how you ended up in your current role?
Yes, so maybe, so I was born in Italy, in the Italian Alps, a small place called Merano. It's close to the Dolomites, pretty beautiful nature. And I went to school like you did. And at the age of 14, I had severe learning difficulties. I found it very difficult to be in school. And my mom tried all kinds of ways to get me to learn. And it was quite a disaster, to be honest. But so I dropped kind of out of school. At the age of 14, you had basically you could leave school basically at that time in Italy. Now it's 16. I wanted to learn a job, a trade. So I got an apprenticeship with a local joiner, furniture maker. And the interesting program that parts of Italy have is that you do an apprenticeship program, but once a week you go to vocational school. So you're not completely dropping out of school in a way. You learn the basic writing, in geometry, in drafting, in making as well. So yeah, I was lucky. So I did 5 years of apprenticeship. Did a final degree where you basically have to design a piece of furniture, make it, draft it, do a costing on it, and yeah, with a particular kind of particular type of joints you have to use and so on. But yeah, so I graduated when I was 19, and yeah, from there I'm traveling for 2 years. Had my 2 gap years. I went traveling for 2 years in the world. Did anything else in furniture. Was working as a gardener, as a waiter, as whatever, as a pizza baker, whatever I could find, whatever job. It basically I went once around the world on a round the world ticket. And I knew that I wanted to do something creative. I wanted to do something with my hands. I wanted to use kind of express myself through making. And I went to an art school to study sculpture in Vienna, and I got the place, and I thought maybe I should try submitted for a design course. So I did basically 2 courses for a year, design and sculpture. I didn't tell either one of them that I was doing 2 courses. Anyway, they found out and they made me choose one or the other. I decided to do design. And the design course was basically a material-based course. It was ceramics and glass, something I hadn't worked with before because Mostly of my previous experience making was with wood, as a joiner. So yeah, I finished my first degree, and I got a summer job working for my professor who had a design studio in Milan. And what should have been 2 or 3 months in the summer became 2 years. So I worked in Milan in an industrial design studio, kind of designing Italian coffee cups, lighting, toilet seats, cutlery, tableware, anything that industrial designers can't design. And it was really an eye-opener because obviously, having been in college before, it was much more about the creativity, the kind of ideas, while the design studio was very much about the developing concepts, developing drawings and drafting and engineering and so on. Anyway, after 2 years, I decided I wanted to continue studying. So I went to London to the Royal College of Art and did my MA there. And yeah, after graduating, I kind of started my own studio, my own practice. So I've been based in East London since 2004. I have a studio there, a workshop there, where we not only design, we make. I have about 4 or 5 people working with me. At the moment, we're 6. And yeah, and we design anything from furniture to interiors to exhibition design, products, and yeah, that's it more or less. Yeah.
Yeah, really interesting. And I love that you mention apprenticeships because we're seeing a really big rise currently in the amount of people that are looking at going to do apprenticeships rather than degrees because of that practical learning side and actually getting the sort of industry experience almost that you don't get through traditional learning. So, really interesting that that was part of your pathway as well, which is, yeah, really cool. Our next question, then, which sort of leads on, is talking about your work. So obviously you've got quite a lot of different projects and things that you've known for and you've worked on. So what's one of the most exciting projects that you have completed, and what made that so memorable?
So I think one of the most memorable projects for me, but I guess also in a collective kind of sense, is the project called 100 Shares in 100 Days, in 100 Ways. So it's basically back in 2004 or 5, I started collecting chairs that I find on the side of the road. When cycling, or I used to drive around. I don't have a car anymore, but I used to drive around, and I would always see chairs sitting in the corner somewhere, and I would just was curious just to collect chairs. Eventually ended up with hundreds of them the warehouse that I was renting at the time. I had plenty of space, and I always liked this idea of putting kind of almost like a collage, putting chairs of different types, different styles, different designs together, and adding my own language to it, my own kind of additions to it. So I set myself this kind of challenge of making a chair a day with found, non-found objects. And really, for me, it was a research project. It wasn't there to be products that I'm going to be selling. It was a research project for me to understand what the chair can be, what it can't be, maybe pushing the boundaries. Also, learning about other people's design in that sense. When you take a chair apart that someone else has designed, you start to understand how they maybe been thinking, what detailing they used, and it's a bit like when you take whatever objects apart. You understand the engineering of it, you understand the cleverness, you understand the and so yeah, and eventually I've showed all those 100 chairs together in a space in London, and since then the exhibition has been touring around the world, and I guess that caught also the attention of the outside world. Yeah.
Definitely. I think when you Google your name, it's the first one that sort of comes up is that project. And it's really interesting to hear you talk about how that started from just that curiosity. And the idea of collecting chairs to create this whole thing, and now it's really interesting. So if any student watching hasn't given that a Google, it's definitely worth looking at, because it's really, really kind of interesting to think about, and that level of curiosity of what goes into both finding the chairs and how they all work and fit together. So yeah, really interesting. Leading on from that, because it's quite an interesting subject, and what you mentioned in the first question about the sort of industry design. How do you balance like the function of an object with design? Um, how important is that? Do you like no? Can you go too far and it's not really what it's supposed to be anymore? Is that a problem, or can it be too boring? What's that like?
Well, I guess design, as far as I know, design, the word design, etymology of the word comes from designating and not from designing, from drawing. There's always this thing people say comes from disegnare, from drawing, but actually it comes from designating. So you designate the function, a use, of an object. So I guess there's always this these two worlds. On one side is the form, how is it going to look? How is it going to appear? What style is it got? And the other side, you have the function that's very rigid in a way. But let's take the example of a chair, for example, again, a chair has a very particular height. There is ergonomics. Ergonomics are the studies about how comfortable you sit in a chair, and how you should be sitting on an office chair, like what posture you should have, and so on. So they're kind of very clear data as well, and instructions. But then a lot of things are also very individual, because we're all different. Our bodies are different. We do different things. We don't not only eat on a chair. We work on them. We work on a computer. Maybe we draw. We do other things on tables with chairs or without tables. We read. So there's a lot of scope in between, I think, what ergonomics tell us and what. And then there is the part that actually how a chair would actually stand up, the engineering of it, So you have this kind of the form, the structure, and the function in a way, and it's a negotiation between those three things, because you want to make something beautiful and elegant, but at the same time interesting, not too boring. It shouldn't just look like a square piece of box in a way. That is, so I think that's a constant struggle in a way, and sometimes we take it too far in either direction. Maybe it becomes all about the comfort and not about kind of the look. Sometimes it's only about the look, and sometimes it's only about the structure. But I guess I was lucky with my 100 chairs in 100 days project that I had so much freedom in a way to express myself. So maybe I had done my experimentation and my kind of curiosity, and maybe that kind of taught me a lot about where the boundary lies. So I guess, maybe it's a question, what is good design? A lot of time people ask me, what is good design? I think good design is about finding that balance between those three things, the look, the structure itself, how does it actually stand up and structurally work, and the function away. And those three things will also, time will tell as well, these things changes. You might design something today, but in 10 years time, we see it with their different eyes, because the style, the thing looks different. Maybe we use things in different ways. For example, I guess a lot of you listeners are maybe younger, but when 30 years ago, we didn't have mobile phones. So the way we use furniture, or maybe even laptops, so the way we use chairs and tables was very different. On tables, people ate, and that was about it. Nobody worked on a table, on a kitchen table, on a computer. So, over time, because we have new other technology, furniture adapt to that as well. And I guess, that's a part of it.
Yeah, definitely glad we asked that one, because it's sort of an interesting question. And you are right in how ordinary things adapt depending on society and changes and how we interact with those objects. So yeah, really interesting. Um, Leading on then, design is such a creative industry that's really about that sort of creative and thinking and challenging. So how important is it to sort of bring your own story or culture or things that you identify with into your design work. Is that something that you like to do? And you know, yeah, how much of yourself do you put into your work?
I think 100%. I mean, I try. I guess we talk about authorship. Taking authorship and being recognizable as well. I guess a bit like I think a musician, would or an actor, whatever, would have their own kind of characteristics and identity. So I think from young age on, I try to kind of define my own design. Not because it's an ego trip in a way. It's also about the ego for sure, but it's also about creating your own language that is recognizable and to be different than other people. And I think that's where the artistic license comes into the game. This designing is not just something that's to do with engineering and finding a good solution to something. It's a personal expression, like an artist would express him or herself, in a way with a style. And I think I think when I was younger, I was always trying to fit into a category. I was trying to kind of assimilate myself to other people's work, that I liked. And at one point, you realize, actually, no. Why am I trying to be someone else? I can just be myself. And I guess that really helped me kind of in my own work, when you trust your own sense of creativity in a way, and you realize that maybe you're not perfect. No one is perfect in a sense. And maybe that goes back again to the schooling thing experience. When I was 14, as I said before, I had extreme learning difficulties, dyslexia and other things. So I found it very difficult to be in school, sit still, and so on. And I always thought that I wasn't good. I wasn't good enough for school. So I thought it was me was the problem in a way. But I realized maybe the system itself didn't cater for that at that time, and I was trying to be someone else rather than being myself. And it took me many years to get away from that kind of feeling and thinking, actually, maybe I just have to be really myself, because of this maybe neurodiversity that I had. I couldn't do certain things, but I could do other things really well. And so, yes, all I would say, if you have any learning difficulties and if you have any neurodiversity, trust your own sense and push your own kind of creativity, your own ideas, your own imagination, because you're going to be really, really special out there. That is your, unique selling point as well. And that's going to make you, a lot more interesting than just fitting in with the rest of, the crowd, and being a good student and whatever that means. So so if you have difficulties, I would say pursue your own kind of dream as well, and your own belief that you can make it into something different maybe than other people maybe expect, or what you maybe yourself expect from yourself. Yeah.
That actually leads really nicely on to our next question, which was around skills. Because of course, part of what you're talking about there is the different skills that come with being slightly neurodiverse that might not align with typical education, like exams and things like that. So we have a question, which is, what are the most important skills, apart from, being creative, that someone needs to start thinking about developing or lean into to succeed in design? And wider than that, if there are any sort of general life skills that you think are really key that students should think about developing now.
I think observation is a very, very important skill. Basically, we can't, as designers, we have whatever, again, your imagination is. It can be really, really, you can have an amazing imagination, but a lot of the input that we get, because as creative person, we get inputs from the outside. It might be through reading, it might be through watching movies, it might be through observing the everyday, what's out in the world, and observing what other people maybe have done before. Or, I mean, I, for example, get a lot of inspiration when sometimes I travel, or I sit on a bus or somewhere, and I see in the corner of my eye, I see something that I think, oh, that's a bit odd, that's a bit strange. I never thought about, like this is out of the ordinary. And I try to understand what this actually means, what I've seen. It could be a lamppost that, I don't know, had suddenly, I don't know, someone drove into a lamppost and it suddenly has a kink in it. And you go like, oh, that's an interesting way that you can bend a piece of metal, for example, you know, as simple as that. So there is a lot about observation in the everyday life, I think, and you can pick up a lot of interesting thinking, a lot of interesting inspirations of that. And I think the second thing I would say is about being able to communicate with other people what maybe your ideas might be, because as a designer, you're only, I mean, I'm a designer maker, but I'm only as good as either my drawings are or my skills of convincing other people that my ideas are good. So a lot of the work as a designer is actually convincing other people that either it's a good idea, and that's the first step. The second thing is how are you going to make this thing? So if you're good at making, you can show people, but you still have to convince someone else that they can make it. There is, so a lot of time, I mean, a lot of my everyday life is about convincing people that what I think is a good idea is also a good idea to them, and that they actually want to make it. So yeah, so I would say observation and persuading other people to, that means communicating with other people ideas. Yeah.
I love that you said that because we had a pre-submitted question, so I'm going to ask it now because
Yeah.
it fits. Somebody asked, "How do you know when you've got a good idea?"
It's a tricky one because as human beings, we always try to overact things. We maybe sometimes out of doubt. We doubt that, we think like, oh yeah, it could be better. We doubt ourselves sometimes. Sometimes we just want to add and add and add. But I'm part of my kind of growing up was about cooking to earn money. I was cooking because I love cooking, and but cooking is always a good analogy, because when you think about, that's what I said, over egging things. When you cook, when you add too many ingredients to something and you don't stop, it just becomes a, I don't know, mismatch, and it doesn't taste of anything anymore. So there's kind of a rule also in cooking a little bit. More than 3-4 ingredients is maybe, depending on the dish, there could be dishes where you add a lot more, but the main ingredients, maybe 3 and 4 ingredients is more than enough, and you just got to stop it there. And sometimes one ingredient is just the right, or two. So you have to trust yourself a little bit, and I think that comes over time. I think that you develop the understanding that maybe you go further and then you come back again. Sometimes maybe you have to go further, and maybe it means you have to make something again. You've gone too far and you have to start again. But I don't think there's a simple rule for it. All I would say is go a little bit further. You can always come back, and that will give you a good understanding in a way. That maybe you've gone too far. It's better to go, I would say, go too far than not far enough, I would say. Because if you don't go far enough, you're not going to learn anything. But at least when you've gone too far, you can kind of start again and do it again. But if you don't push yourself in a way to go far enough, you haven't really learned anything.
I feel that like that's another sort of skill and a bit of advice there, isn't it? To kind of push more than what put more in than you think you should, and then you can always do it again or do less if it needs it. But uh, you know, thinking of sort of a wider thing, it's always good to make the most out of everything, and it's sort of reflection, not just within design or making a project, but within those skills that you can develop just generally. So yeah, really cool to think about. We've got a couple more questions then before we move on to our student questions. And our next one is talking about challenges. Obviously, design is a huge, huge industry with loads of different things that you can look at. But what are some challenges that you've come across in your career when working in design, and how did you sort of deal with those challenges?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge we have these days is sustainability. Even though I don't really like the word so much, sustainable means everything and nothing. But yeah, let's use the word sustainable. You know, the biggest challenge is nowadays, I guess, where we have so many products, we have so many objects in the world, and you know, as a designer, keep on adding to this. You know, is that really a good idea? But all I would say as well is that, I mean, I'm a physical person. I make things, physical object. There's other ways to design these days. You know, I mean, there's many areas of design. You know, there is digital design. It could be from website to applications to everything else. There is eco design, where you can basically material research. You can, you know, like try to find new interesting materials, or maybe it's about the use of energy kind of finding new ways or better use to save energy or to harness energy. We have social design, where it's about how we as humans interact, you know, in public spaces, or how we actually design systems. So, you know, design is also about designing systems. It's again about designating. How do we designate systems to our world, to our environment? And we've seen a lot, you know, if you think about all the apps we have on our phone, they are kind of systems. A lot of them are out there to make money, for sure. But there are other apps that are, you know, make us kind of do different things, and they make us, I don't know, look at things in different ways. So yes, what I would say is not just about doing physical objects and products and so on, selling more and more, but it can also be about really other kind of aspects of what we need as humans and in our society. So yeah, I think definitely about how we live together, how we can waste less energy, how can we reuse materials or reuse and maybe less waste. All around those issues, I think they need a lot of attention. You know, yeah. So that's definitely a challenge that we need. But I think there's a lot of interesting new jobs out there in the design world. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. The design in general is so vast. And that's why we're so glad to have you on, who's the sort of making and designing, because that's quite an unusual combination, I think. You find quite a lot of designers that do just the design and then someone else will sort of implement that design. But you have that sort of creativity and the creating that goes along with it. So that's really sort of interesting to get both your perspectives on that. Um, so yeah, really cool. Okay, we've got one more question we'll ask, and then we'll move on to the questions that have been pre-submitted from our students and any live ones that come in. So our final sort of formal question is: what piece of advice would you give to any students watching who might be interested in going into a career in design?
Good question. I would say I think it's really good um, to do a foundation course. I think foundation courses are really good. You know, a lot of colleges offer these foundation courses where you basically you learn different skills, you know, and you understand a little bit where you might be more kind of attracted to, what's more kind of your what fits your kind of, you know, your character in a way. And I think from there onwards you will have already gained so much kind of knowledge about yourself and what interests. So then I think either you go into an apprenticeship or you go into continue doing kind of design school, and you try to. But I would say again, it's a curiosity. You know, it's curiosity out there. It's kind of go and look at exhibitions, not just design exhibition. Go and see art exhibition. Go and see all sorts of exhibitions, and you know, books are a really great resource in a way. I think where you get libraries are fantastic places where physical objects are there. I mean, the internet is great, you know, because you can look for a lot of things very quickly. But I think libraries are great because you can just browsing libraries are fantastic. Kind of, you just pick up a book you would have never ever found it on the internet, maybe. Yeah, and um, try to learn a skill. I would say, whatever your interest is, try to learn that skill. Either you're good at drafting, maybe you're good at making, maybe you're good at digital work, or a combination of it. Use those skills, because I think your interest in learning, I think it's the biggest driver, and also the biggest kind of asset you're going to have.
Yeah, love it, love it. Great way to sort of move on to our student questions. And we're going to start with this question, which I think is really fun.
Mhm.
And it's, what's the weirdest material that you've worked with?
So again, the weirdest material. Let me think. We tried to make some tabletops with a material called casein. Casein is made from milk protein, so it's one of the oldest kind of plastic. So before we had plastic made out of petroleum, out of petrol, basically, polymers they call them. But you can make kind of a plastic material out of many. You can make it out of cellulose. You can make it out of many different things. But this was made kind of 100 and something years ago. You basically you split the kind of milk proteins, and that it's kind of a plasticky material, and you can add pigments to it and color to it. So it looks like a streaky, marbly kind of plastic buttons. Buttons for clothing buttons used to be made out of casein. Still, sometimes nowadays they are made of casein. And so yes, you try to make a table, and the problem is that it really has a problem with humidity. As soon as it gets humid or dry, the material really behaves, shrinks, and expands. So we made these tables, and they would all crack and then shrink, and then so yeah, that was kind of the weirdest, and not successful use. But yeah, but I still love it. I still love to make something from it. Maybe something very small, more like jewelry. Yeah.
You've taught me something new, because I didn't know that was a thing. And I imagine that's quite fun as well. Like when you start looking into this sort of making process, finding new materials or materials you haven't worked with before, and how do they work or react. It's quite an interesting thing to think about, really.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the other part of design. Is not just about wood, metal, and glass or whatever you use. It's about kind of trying to find interesting materials, find interesting ways of using the materials, giving it your own kind of characteristics. Yeah, and sometimes you invent those materials. That's the other exciting things. That sometimes, because you can't find the certain materials, you start kind of experimenting, and you invent your own materials by adding materials together, laminating them, or pressing them together, and so on. I mean, there's a whole world out there as well of designers who invent materials, the material designers, and also a fascinating kind of field, where especially nowadays we try to create more ecologically friendly materials that are that have less impact on the world. And yeah.
Definitely linking back to that sustainability thing, isn't it? There's a big movement to find sustainable resources. So I imagine there's lots of work right now in that sort of creating sustainable materials. Our next question then is, if you weren't a designer working in design, what job would you do?
Good question. Very good question. I probably would do something with food, because food was always very close to me. And I'd probably be a chef, I think, because I always take this analogy that design and cooking is somewhat similar, because you have a set of ingredients, in the kitchen, vegetables and fish and meat and spices and so on. And similar in design, you have some primary materials, you have wood, metal, and glass, and plastics, and leather, and things. And then you have some spices. There could be colors, it could be surface thing. And then you have a set of tools. I mean, in cooking, you steam, you fry, you deep fry, you roast, and so on. And a similar design, you remove materials, you add material, you join material, you weld, you plane, you sand, and so on. And yeah, I mean, in cooking, it's all a bit faster and immediate. In design, it's a bit slower. But they're similar, and I think, yeah, they're similar creative, I think, in a way.
Yeah, definitely. I like it. It's that same sort of making something, isn't it? At the end,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
start with something else, then you end up with a different product at the end. So yeah, I can see it. Our next question then is: have you ever struggled with self-doubt? And if you did, how did you push past it?
Of course, I mean, we all do. I mean, I guess the biggest self-doubt I had when I left school, or just while in school, because I mean, I wasn't diagnosed at the time, and I just thought I was a loser, and I couldn't get things. Learning for some people, some of my friends, was very easy. They came to school, they never did any homework. They just came to school and they just did, and I couldn't. It wasn't possible for me. So yes, of course, I had struggled, and I guess doubt is always in our human nature. I'm just going to deviate a little bit now into another field. Everyone is using AI these days, artificial intelligence, and but it's interesting that AI tries to create a human kind of brain in one way, cognitive kind of, but AI never has a doubt, and there's no maybe, AI is programmed on yes and no's, you know, it's zeros and one. It's like binary, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. While us humans, we have maybe. We go like, oh, maybe I should do this, and that sometimes that maybe stuck, so we can't get on that maybe, beyond that maybe. We're like stuck in that, like, oh, maybe I don't know anymore, I don't know. But I would say that's a very, very important part of us being human, and we shouldn't undervalue also that sometimes that kind of doubt can be a little beneficial as well, as long as we manage to kind of, at the end of the tunnel, get out of it and find a way to learn something from that moment when we are in doubt, and look back at it and say like, okay, there was something maybe because I doubted. I am also human, not a machine. We are not machines. We are humans, and we have feelings, we have questions, we have insecurities, and so on. So what I would say is, maybe if you are stuck in that, try to draw. Drawing is really good. Painting is really good. Working with clay is very good. Distract your brain. Let your hands kind of carry the doubt away. Just draw. I say just draw. Um, use whatever medium you can find to express yourself, and use your hands. And I think you will see that these doubts, these clouds will move away. That moment when you are actively um, um, creative, and yeah, it's a really good way, I think, to distract your mind. Sometimes we have to distract our clouds, our maybes, and our insecurities in a way. But it doesn't mean that we are not worthy, because we are doubting. Everyone doubts. Some people are just really good at masking it. Uh, yeah,
Very true. Some people are just a lot better at faking it, and then you
yeah,
think, "How is that person so confident?" And they've
yeah,
just learned how to just put
yeah.
on a good shield and are, still self-doubting or nervous on the inside. A couple more questions, and then we're basically at the end of the session. So we'll go for this one, which is really fun, which is favorite item of furniture ever designed, whether that's by you or anyone else.
Well, it's got to be a chair. I mean, and that's a very specific chair that I really love, because for me, it kind of brings that, what I said before, the form, the structure, and the function together. and it's a chair designed by an Italian designer architect called Joe Ponti. That's Gio, and his last name is Ponti, Ponti. He was an architect designer, worked kind of from the 1930s to the 80s almost, a very long thing. Very influential in Italy, built many buildings, many designs. You've probably seen some of it. And he designed a chair called Super Leggera, super light. And if you Google it, it's basically a chair that a child can lift up with one finger. It's 2.5 kilograms of weight, and it's a very genius kind of design chair, I think. Yeah, that I really think brings it. Yeah, this kind of three three worlds really nicely together. You know, the function, the structure, and the form.
We will share that, we'll link to that within the feedback email. So if you'd like to have a look at that, keep an eye out on the feedback email, and we'll include his name and the name of the chairs in that as well for those watching. Great, perfect. We'll go for the final question then. And then we look at closing down just because we're running out of time. Okay, we'll go for this one, which is quite fun. What is your favorite or most underrated tool that you use in your workshop?
Very good question. I like hammers somehow. I have a collection of hammers, and you wouldn't believe that how many different types of hammers you can have for different work. So I have a mallet, I have actually two mallets. One is a wooden mallet, one is a rubber mallet. You want to hit something with a certain intensity, but you don't want to break it. So the rubber bounces off, it doesn't destroy but it gives it a good knock. Then I have got and I have particular Japanese hammers to use for specific nails. Then you have a claw hammer, to pull out nails. That is kind of has a particular way. It's actually use big nails when you do something a bit rougher. Then we have hammers we use chisels, and like they kind of more, yeah. Again, but a lot about the weight and the length of a hammer handle and the shape of it. So yeah, so I don't know. I think maybe have about 12, 15 different types of hammers, and of course, people don't really use hammers so much anymore because we don't really use nails much. In the old days, people would nail things together much more. Now you screw things together, you glue it, or you tape things. I don't know. So the hammer, someone together with the nail, are totally underrated. And all I could say, there's a very, very nice project by a Italian designer as well. If you're interested in making your own furniture, I'm going to type it in the private chat. His name is Enzo Mari. He was actually one of my professors as well in college. Basically, it's a project where it's actually a book you can buy, but you can find it online. He gives you instructions and drawings how to make furniture with a very simple kind of pine, softwood bits of wood, a saw and nail and hammer. And I think it's a great project to kind of start learning about furniture and about how you nail something together. So yeah, I would highly recommend that project. There is also kind of a social aspect. So he did it in a way because he thought everyone should have the possibility to make their own piece of furniture and not having to go out there and maybe pay a lot of money for it. So yeah, I put it in the chat. So yeah, hammers and nails, underrated but very important. And you'd be surprised how difficult it actually is sometimes to put a nail in a piece of wood, straight, nice, not bending it, with the right kind of one hit, nice one hit or two hit kind of stroke of hammering. So it's a real skill, I think, using a hammer, a nail.
Love it. Definitely wasn't expecting hammer to be that tall, but
Yeah.
glad it was. It was really interesting, and thank you for those resources. So I will be sharing those with the feedback link afterwards. And it is quarter two, so it's been 45 minutes. That's the end of our time. So do you have any final thoughts or feelings that you'd like to share with our viewers today as we say goodbye and wrap up the session?
Yes, all I would say, trust in your own skills. Sometimes it's not easy, but trust your own skill, challenge people, challenge yourself, and use your hands. Use your brain, but use your hands as well. The hands are somehow a very important part of our learning. Use your hands and to distract your brain sometimes, and do it. All I would say, do it. Don't keep yourself away from maybe overthinking it and maybe questioning yourself because you think you're not good at making. You learn by doing. Learning by doing. I think this is a very important part of the process. And you only become better. You're not going to get worse.
Perfect. Thank you. What a nice way to end today's session. Thank you for joining us. It's been really wonderful having you on and finding out all your insights into design and making. It's been really interesting. So thank you.
Thank you as well, everyone, and best of luck. Have a good summer.
All right. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. A feedback poll should have gone live now in the Q&A box. So if you have a couple of minutes, please do complete that and we will share all of our feedback today with Martina. So please, if you have a couple of minutes, do that. Other than that, we will be sending the recording of today's session to you shortly, along with the names of the artists and some links for resources that have been mentioned today as well. So do keep an eye out for that. Other than that, we hope you have the wonderful rest of your day and you enjoyed today's session. Bye for now.